Okay, everybody, so it's 2 o'clock. Let's get started with the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar on performance is more than support. Now, I'm not sure, I'm looking at my attendee list at the moment, and I don't know that I saw any of you at World of Learning. Please do correct me if I'm wrong in the chat window. But I actually explored this session in the breakout seminar sessions at World of Learning. And I wanted to bring it really to a webinar today because it seems to be hitting on a lot of topics that people are mulling over at the moment, that are concerned about, that are excited about it. They're using it to help set their strategy. And it really encompasses, I suppose, what we are all about at Willow in terms of looking at an entire workflow perspective to learning and performance and knowledge management. So, like I said, just at the start, at the top of the hour, if anybody has any problems with audio or you can't hear me or there's something that you would like me to explain, I'm going to keep the chat area open throughout the webinar. So do give me a shout. On text if there's any issue with any of the content or the audio quality, all that sort of good stuff. I'm also recording the session today, so if you have any colleagues or friends that weren't able to make it, I will be posting up to our YouTube channel later today. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Well, why performance is more than support? Well, there's a lot of conversation really in the last couple of years about providing performance support content to our people to help make their lives easier. And there's certainly no wasted effort in looking at how we can improve the job experience of our people and create content really at that point of need. But it's really only scratching the surface of what performance actually means in an organisation today and what it looks like it's going to mean going forward. And it got me thinking about these aspects really. What does performance mean in its holistic sense to an organisation? Because at a very personal way, it depends on what we're trying to do. You know, if I'm taking up a new sport, then performance will mean one thing. If I'm trying to be a good parent, it might mean something else. If I'm running a business, it will mean something else. If I'm looking for a promotion, it'll be something else. So there's lots of facets to it. And in the context of organisational learning, I thought there were 5 key areas that if we could hone in on, ask ourselves some really important questions about the nature of what's going on in an organisation, it could help to make some really good decisions about the way we ought to structure learning and development going forward, the way we ought to develop our content, the types of choices that we make with tools and technology, and how we're going to create a performance environment, bringing together all the skills and capability and talents of an organisation. So you need to create the right conditions for performance. You've got to think about the goals that we're setting, which sounds really straightforward, but the goal setting, particularly in the learning development context, can often be very transactional. We need people to comply with this, so we'll get them to do that. And it's always more nuanced than that. I'm going to look at how communities really impact the performance of an organisation, the supporting tools and technology that help performance, but also the ways in which it can hinder it sometimes, and the sorts of tools and technology we ought to be providing to our people. And then finally, the people themselves. So you as learning professionals and the people that work in your organisation. So we're going to start with conditions. Now, I'm currently about 10-ish thousand words into a book on this, on this model that I've been formulating over the last year or so, creating a performance environment. And this is where the 5 steps really came from. Looking at culture, job descriptions, reward, career development. Are we actually aligning our culture to performance? And that might seem like an easy thing to say, but I wonder how many of you today on the webinar, in your organization's mission statement or its values or whatever, somewhere it will say people are our most important asset. But do we create the conditions by which people can possibly be the asset that we want them to be? And certainly with the changing nature of job roles, with automation, with artificial intelligence, with changing job patterns, work-life balance, etc., I believe conditions and well-being are actually going to become incredibly important and far more mainstream going forward. Then thinking about goal setting, how do we set the strategic goals? What's the relationship between an individual's objectives and the overall strategy of an organisation? How the dialogue between people really gets things done in organisations, how communities work together, how they form the unwritten rules of the organisation, how they can help and hinder progress in different ways. And then the choice of tools to suit your context. There's any number of technology solutions that you may bring to bear, but are they right for your environment? And then people. What does this mean for the learning profession? What sorts of jobs will we need to be doing to make sure we accelerate and maximise performance in the organisation? So we are going to start with a little bit of context around here. Why is this so important today? And I saw Howard Yashe talk at the Training Journal conference last year, and he said this: a job is not the same thing as meaningful work. Labour is replaceable, talent is not. And as this year has gone on, and we've seen more applications of things like IBM Watson, the AI engine that is automating elements of people's work. If you think particularly in healthcare and law, for example, that actually there are lots of aspects of jobs today that will be replaceable, not necessarily by other humans. It could well be technology. But the talent and the application and the ability to be creative and then develop new insights and innovation. And I mean creativity in every sense. I don't mean you have to be working in the creative sector, but creative problem solving and finding new ways of working are the things that are going to add the difference to the organisation, will make it and you stand out from the crowd. So it's a really important factor on all of this, because then it means, well, what is it we're going to need our people to be really good at? What will really great performance look like in an organisation? Well, first of all, with the plethora of information and media and dialogue and content out there, people will have to be literate, very literate in this way of working. Now, there are a generation, obviously, of workforce that will have been brought up with these tools as part of their early education experience, moving through into the workforce today. But if you think about it, that's still a relatively small cohort, because even the adoption of technology in the classroom has been a little bit slow in some areas. So for much of our workforce, actually media literacy is still a very, very important skill, but it might be one that we've neglected or assumed that everybody would be comfortable with. Is then making sense of all that information. So we have all of these different ways in which I can gather information to improve my performance. I could be looking at YouTube videos, I could be having a conversation with my colleague, I could be reaching out to a network on LinkedIn, I could be doing a formal learning course, etc. But I have to make sense of all of this and apply it to my context. So that ability to look at lots of different pieces of information, to critically analyse them and apply them to our roles will be important. And that with it brings a lot of cognitive load. We are asking a lot of our people in complex and ambiguous environments. And it's where, for me, and on a personal level, I'm really interested in looking at how that is actually going to affect people from a human factors and well-being perspective. Is something that I think we will be very foolish to ignore, and our ability to help people perform in a very literal sense will be really, really important to the well-being of the organisation as well as individuals. And then, of course, if we're reaching out to our network and working in a collaborative economy, then our ability to work together socially will be incredibly important. Again, it's thinking about, this isn't about robots taking over the world, but it's thinking about what we as human beings bring to the organisation, those unique skills and talents, and actually being able to leverage our social capabilities to apply them to work will be incredibly important. And it's an interesting reflection point just to sit back for a moment and look at that list and go, oh, I wonder whether our education system really sets us up for this, whether we are preparing our young people for this new world of work. It's something that I think about quite a lot. And we at Willow are particularly interested in doing a lot of work in apprenticeships at the moment. And I think some of these things are really important factors to think about, both for your workforce and young people joining us in the workforce. So the big shift here really is rather from control, because the challenge with control is not only most human beings don't particularly want to be controlled. Also, we work in a constantly shifting environment, which means the illusion of control just doesn't fit. It's not fit for purpose anymore. So the learning shift is about a continuous improvement and iteration on our skills as things change around us very rapidly. And that brings a really different flavour to what learning means in an organisation. And it also challenges, just as I was saying with, our young people, does the education system give them the tools that they will need in this new world of work? Equally, it's shining a light on areas like learning and development to say those traditional roles that we've had in learning and development, are they the ones that we need going forward? Are they the ones that support continuous learning and performance improvement? So I'm going to pause there for a minute and ask you a quick question. Some of you may well already know the answer to this, but Accenture, Microsoft and Adobe have all ditched annual performance reviews. Anybody want to hazard a guess in the chat why they've done it? Be brave, and I will take a sip of water. So not a good audio sound, I know, but I'll take a sip of water while you have a think about that, and just pop your answer in the chat. What do you think? Yep, Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Lovely to see you here, by the way. Feedback should be continuous. Yep. Negative repercussions on company and performance. Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Yeah, interesting one there. And it certainly rings home to some of the reasons why they wanted to ditch them. Any more for any more? Keep right, but I will just because of time, I'll start to move on through the slides. But if there's anything else that you think of, oh, Margaret, they are not just a one-off event. And I mean, certainly, Margaret, that's something that's come up, isn't it, again and again, that this annual performance reviews, why should we have them just at one point in time, or even biannual? But actually, really, for Accenture, Microsoft, and Adobe, it was an even bigger question than that, really. It was Ellen Shook, there's a whole sort of quote, but essentially saying that what they want to gather is a holistic view of performance and potential. But what she means by holistic, it's really important to understand the context here, is they're looking for future potential, not past performance. Now, that isn't to say that the past performance isn't necessarily a predictor of future performance, but it certainly isn't always a sensible predictor. So history can tell us something, but the context around us that's changing means that we need to apply a new lens to it. And I'm sure that there are plenty of world events that we can think of that would be guilty of that, of sometimes we don't learn from the past, or alternatively, we repeat the mistakes of the past. So it's about thinking about future potential. What was really interesting, actually, just very recently, I said it was 2015, recently Harvard Business Review posted a really interesting article, and I haven't got the link, I'm afraid, but I will share it with you afterwards, and I'd really encourage you to Google it and find it, on why talent management programs fail. And essentially their argument is very similar to this, is that talent management often looks at the competencies and the values of the organisation, and let's look at all those people are displaying all those things that we've written down, that we believe this is what the company is all about. And their argument was actually, in an increasingly competitive environment where startups are able to fund and get going very, very quickly, actually it might be your agitators and your slight troublemakers that could be your talent, the ones that think differently, that do differently, to coin a Steve Jobs phrase of think differently. It's those people that we want to look for, not necessarily carbon copies of what's gone before. Interesting thoughts there, really, on performance and how your organisation looks at performance and what it values and what it rewards. And it's also thinking about, I just quite liked this GIF. I don't know if it's actually it may not necessarily play on here. There we go. But it's also things like the induction fail. I just think this is absolutely perfect. You join an organisation, you want to be inspired, you want to understand how you will contribute to performance, and yet what we do is we give lots of policy, and that's not to do with performance there. It's simple performance support and good access to information, good user design that should answer all those questions for our people. Very, very simply, we should be focused on what can you do in this organisation to thrive, rather than, I say, the typical try not to yawn and get through it. So thinking about this, if we're thinking about performance in the whole, what it means to us, what conditions do we need to create to help our organisations perform? Now, in the recent past, obviously in the UK, we've had the junior doctors dispute. And I think this is an absolutely fascinating one. We're asking people, and think about this in your organisation, and I say the way in which people work, the ergonomics of your environment, the hours that you work, the way that you're rewarded, the support that you get from your peers, well-being, all these sorts of things. Are we creating a performance-focused environment? Because they might seem like nice to haves, but they're absolutely vital. And when you're talking about people that literally work in life or death situations, the juxtaposition of asking so much and very, very important decision making, critical decision making in very short periods of time with very complex situations, but asking people to do that when they are exhausted, tired, in poor conditions, poorly supported, it just seems insane. But it's something, obviously, it's been pervasive for many, many years, and it's not surprising though that this has come to a fore. The medical profession certainly isn't getting any less complex as more and more research and information comes out, and yet we still expect so much of our junior doctors. Equally, they're on the other side of the performance scale. That's overload. That's the whole sort of cognitive overload and asking people to work when they're exhausted. It's also the problem of stagnation and believing that everything that we've done before, if we don't critically analyse, well, what does performance now mean in our market context? You could end up with a bit of a blockbuster video on your hands, where you end up being caught out by streaming and the changes in the way some similar things obviously have happened to many people that sell music, that streaming has fundamentally shifted the marketplace, and the lower cost of DVDs, if you want to own physical copies and things like Amazon, totally changed that marketplace, but they didn't change the way in which they provided the service or what they were providing. And so you end up in this sort of situation. There's plenty of stories of those, but that's that sort of complacency of everything that we did previously. I'm sure it will still work. So when we're thinking about this, if we're too abstract and people don't know what they need to do to perform, then that's a problem, and I'll go on to goal setting now. But equally, if we don't give people space to explore their context and the market and the environment, then we could end up with a blockbuster. And I liked this quote from Amy Brann, who does a lot of research into neuroscience in the organisation, was a medic by training actually, and the author of a book called Engaged. Her phrase, "We don't manage people, we manage environment, systems and processes." And I think that's a very interesting thing to take away for anybody that works in learning, whether you are an e-learning developer through to a coach or facilitator, you're a head of department, you are a supplier, whoever you are. What we're doing is we're creating the environment, systems and processes for people to perform. We don't do performance to people, people perform. And I think that's a nice way to kind of couch all of this. And then after that, about this time last year, I met a chap called Tom Spiglanin, who is head of learning at the aerospace company. That's the name of the company, aerospace company in the US. And he literally works with rocket scientists. So you imagine working in learning development where your audience are all rocket scientists. What can you teach them? And that's the whole point. His phrase was, my job is to put the right people together in the right environment at the right time with the right tools. And he talks about catalyzing learning, creating the conditions for something to take place between two agents that will create something new. That's his job. His job isn't to, I'm going to teach them this, I'm going to teach them that, I'm going to teach them the other. It's about creating the environment for them to bring all of their immense intelligence and capabilities together to build something different and new, or improve and maintain what we've already got. But as I said, you've got the conditions, and do we have both physically, psychologically, and from a business perspective, are we creating the right conditions for people to perform? Then there's also the goal setting. So what does performance mean in our organisation? So here's another quick question, so that I'm not just talking at you for the whole time. What makes an effective call centre? What are the main learning needs for anybody that has either done what I did whilst I was a student to pay my way through university and worked in a call centre, through to perhaps work in organisations where there were call centres, or perhaps you've worked in one yourself, led one. What do you think the main needs are? You've probably got a good view, actually, even if you're a consumer of call centres. I'm sure you've probably got a pretty good view of what you'd like them to be better at. Interpersonal skills and system usage, yeah. How to deal effectively with a range of people, technology, empathise with people, brilliant. Yeah, all really, really good. Lovely. See if there's any more coming through. That's grand. We've got a nice mix there actually of sort of systems usage and interpersonal skills. Now, the interesting thing here is I've worked myself in environments, and I worked for some years ago at Orange, where obviously call centres were a core part of the operational element of a consumer technology company. And you could say, okay, that's so. What we'll do then is we will put people through all of our product training, and we will do a customer service course, and then we're off and running. And often we're looking for a to B relationship. So I want all the ROI, good old ROI and learning, all the ROI on that. But actually, it's about continuous learning in a call center. You've got people at the front line of your service, of your product or service that you put out to your customers, whether it be in a public or private sector. And they are hearing how they're being received, how they're being used, what's working, what's not working. They are a vital source of knowledge in your organization. They can also be very costly because often we have really high turnover. So we're looking at just, we want to improve customer satisfaction, but actually there are all sorts of ways in which that's influenced. That's not just good customer service. There's all sorts of factors. And one tool, and this is stolen from the KM world, David Skirm developed this, is the benefits tree. Now it looks a bit complicated, but this is where, if you want to challenge your organisation to become a performance organisation, rather than just look at, well, let's put this course in place, or let's do a big comms campaign to tell everybody that we're now an organisation that's focused on performance, actually, you need to look at the various different benefits that different approaches will bring. So what are we trying to aim for here? Well, the external benefits we want, what we're really influencing, and a call centre is great because they measure this stuff all the time. We want a closer fit of our products and services to customer need, because then they shouldn't have to call us as much, actually. We are very aligned to their needs, so not only do they not call us as much, but they come back and they want to buy more products from us. Those products are a higher quality and service, so they advocate to others. That we improve the responsiveness, so the efficiency of the call centre is improved. And bottom line, customer satisfaction is improving, and then all of the commercial benefits that come from that. But you're not going to get that from day one. So if you think, right, okay, we don't just want to put a course in place, you want to invest in creating a performance environment that encourages learning at the end of the day, like after action reviews, that we have a great way to capture that we want people to be working in communities and to be peer mentoring, and people have buddies when they join the organisation so they feel well supported. We would like to improve the systems that we have in place so they can get at the information that we need. You start to add all this up and you think, oh, this is all going to be expensive. Is it going to deliver these external benefits? Actually, there are more residual benefits that also have impact. So if we think about, okay, what do we need to be good at to get these things? Well, I need to know what my role is. I need to know what my customers' needs are. I need to be able to get the information I need really quickly. I need it to be accurate, and I want to be able to do the best that I can do. So if I can do that, if I can think about, okay, what are the knowledge benefits I need to gain from whatever learning solution and performance environment I put in place, what will that mean? Well, one big issue is actually getting people up to speed quick enough. While they should get their potential achieved more quickly, we should reduce direct training, because we've got this kind of feedback loop of performance coming back in, because we're fostering communities and continuous learning. We're well learned. We're better at solving problems because people are sharing those problems with us, so we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. And we're sharing approaches across buildings. We are building more of a learning environment. That means staff turnover is down, improved morale. We should be improving against our targets, single call resolution. You can see these things happening. So when you've got an organisation that's impatient going, I need those things, it's actually, there are lots of ways in which we can start to measure the health and benefits of a performance organisation. And breaking the benefits down like this is a really great way to make your case for improving the learning environment in your organisation. Another way that I love to do this, and apologies for anybody that's seen me bang on about this before, but I think it's a really, really useful tool, is looking at something like value chain to do goal setting. So you've been tasked as learning development, right, our big thing for 2017 is that we we've got to increase our market share. Growth may have been steady or stagnant. We have got to do something that really, ups the ante here. What can we do? Well, we could sell all of our business development part of the business, or our sales force. We want the swankiest, sexiest sales program there is on the market, and we'll put them all through that. Well, before you leap to that end of the game, let's think about it. Increased market share. What do we need to know? What do we need to know about our customers in the market? What processes support being able to increase our market share? And what sort of feedback do we need from our people, from the organisation, from the market to be able to increase that market share? And there are all sorts of ways in which this can build up if you do a value chain. So let's think about the customers in the market. Okay, well, to increase our market share, I need to know better what's happening in the market, increase market intelligence. I need better customer insights, and hopefully that will give me a better product fit. So that's what I need. Processes, well, we need to improve delivery quality, because to increase market share, people need to rely on us to produce a really great product or service and come to us rather than somebody else. I also know that Jones Co. PLC down the road are really quick to market. We need to be quicker to market. We need to be able to get our products out there quicker than the competition, but they need to be great. And we need to understand more about how our products are hitting when they're in place. Are we making enough of referrals and people that are already using our products? Are we emphasising case studies? Do we have good insight into how the longevity of the product and its quality is fitting out in the workplace? And by starting to break it down, this is a very basic value chain. There are so many more steps you could put in here, but just for the purposes of illustration today, if you just start to uncover, what does this really mean? What's it made up of from a workflow perspective? And this hits lots of different departments, actually. What you can then start to do is go, okay, well, where are we falling down then? Where are either the gaps, or where's the talent that we're just not maximising? We're really good at that, but other areas of the business just don't know about it. And from there, we can highlight the learning needs, because there may not be learning needs in all of this. This quicker to market may purely be something about the launch channels and delivery channels or production methodology that we use that just needs improving. We need to do something different. But it could actually be a learning and development responsibility here. Market intelligence, maybe absolutely nobody knows how to use our CRM. We could be having market intelligence coming out of our ear holes, but nobody can get at it. Does that mean that people just don't have the knowledge that they need to get at what they need? Could be that the content that we have is no good, and that needs to be swapped out. Maybe with learning need, better delivery quality. Well, it may well be that there is some process improvement training that needs to be done. That could be the case. It may not be at all. It may actually be the current suppliers that we use, or maybe the resilience of the materials that we use. So by having this conversation, not only do you concentrate your spend where you need to spend it, but it also builds massive credibility for you as a professional in your organisation, because you're looking far wider than just the learning sphere. You're looking at what makes up performance to deliver a particular strategic need for the organisation, and you're helping giving that insight. And I think as a trusted colleague in the organisation, and one that's really valued, that's a great way to build your credibility in the organisation. So that's our goal setting. I'm going to take a pause for a moment. I'll just give you a few seconds. Any questions at this point, or anything that anybody wants me to clarify? And I'll take a sip of water. Whilst also my Apple Watch tells me that I've still got to do a bit more exercise today, everybody. So there we go. Okay, all good? Fabulous. Right, so let's move on to community, because as we know, all value chains may be common to many. Are there any templates, set pieces? Yes, certainly. Dave, I'm very happy to share anything that I've got on value chains and some links for you. Also, I would recommend Nigel Harrison's performance consulting model, which is not dissimilar, actually. It's the same sort of emphasis, and that really gives a good kind of line of inquiry in terms of the types of questions that you can ask to uncover those key goals and the elements that make up how work gets done in the organisation. Some good stuff there too. He's a good chap, is our Nigel. Right, performance and the community. So, we hear the phrase, greater than the sum of its parts, that within the organisation, although that we need to support individuals, we also need to think about maximising the power of the community and the collective. And Etienne Wenger has been writing on this for donkey's years, and it's my background is in communities and collaboration. But I think perhaps more now than ever, they're being recognised for the power that they can bring to the organisation, because they have continued to persist, whether they are obvious or subtle. People form small or large communities that come and go with time depending on the need. And the reason why they work so well is that they are the building blocks of a social learning system, but they're more than that. So if we're saying, okay, we want people to be able to be self-directed learners, to learn socially, to collaborate, all those things you'll see in everybody's learning strategy, how are we going to enable them to do it? What does it really mean in practice? And actually, we need to be able to give people to access to people that they can talk with, debate with, get quick, rapid help when they need it, or deal with complex problems, or perhaps even instigate change. Because that's the interesting thing with communities, because they're not bound by a formal learning structure or formal learning course. Not only can communities respond at least at the rate of change, often they are the people that make the change. And the power of communities is really to form the central sense-making elements. So even if your organisation has the most fantastic programme for leadership, or the most fantastic programme for negotiation, or the most fantastic programme on Cisco networking, actually the context is so important, because the context will be discretely different for all of you. And it may not be that the formal learning is wrong. That could be a really useful thing actually to get some formal stuff in, but the community then makes sense of it, talks about how it will be applied in context, where it will work, where it won't work, things that I've tried before, a bit of failure, a bit of success, all those things that will help bring that learning to life so that people know readily how to apply it. A great example here is when I worked at Orange, and we had communities around our key products globally, and one of them was a voicemail. And now what used to happen at Orange is basically people were promoted because they were the shining star in that particular product. But what we realised is that essentially what you ended up with, though, is that one discrete view of that product. Although they were very talented people, we're working in a global organisation. The local context and local contacts for our various operations would be discretely different. So we moved to more of a community virtual team style way of managing and leading those teams, where the global product manager was essentially a community facilitator, and they were facilitating knowledge exchange between the product managers in country. And at the time, there was nothing you could tell the UK about telcos. We knew the lot. But this facilitator knew that wasn't really the case, and would bring the team together. And on one call that I was witness on, because I was coaching her at the time on facilitation, Croatia just spoke up just at the end of the meeting, just to say, oh, by the way, we've seen a massive increase in revenue on voicemail in the last quarter, and we just wanted to share with you what we did. And it was a very pedestrian changing of prompts actually on the voicemail, and it meant a little bit of change in software and just some little tweaks they had to do, but they saw revenue creeping up. And everybody wanted to jump on this. It was a very simple knowledge exchange. They asked, right, who was the supplier that you used to change that software? Why did you change it to those prompts? What research did you do, etc., etc.? They shared all of that work, saved massive amounts of research time in doing it. Every country applied it. Revenue shot up. And it's a simple community facilitated conversation that happened at that point in time. And it's really, really useful, because there are certain things that you can codify and there are certain things that you can't. So there are things that we can try and write down. This is the best way for a product to use, the best way to do something. But actually, sometimes things are really difficult. If something's highly codified, like being able to, here we are, cook a pizza, build a shed, or build a computer, actually, if I codified that in a really systematic way, then that would be a very simple way to share knowledge. But if I'm looking at how do I increase the revenue of this particular product, actually, sometimes it can be quite difficult to codify. So talking about something that actually is quite a complex task. And I like this analogy from Nick Milton, thinking about, okay, well, why do you need communities? Because there'll be some things you can codify and some things that are tacit that people will need to explore, practice, get professional support with, be able to perhaps work out together. Maybe that nobody's ever done this before. And that's how they make those breakthroughs. And that's why I like the power of communities. And in fact, even forget about just within the organisation. I can never pronounce it properly. I'm so sorry, but it's a huge telco in China. The company puts deliberate effort to solicit customer feedback. So their community of customers are incredibly loyal, they're very, very vocal, and they essentially help design the UX and features of subsequent phones. It's how they do their R&D essentially. So not only is it a very cost-effective way to do R&D, but it builds massive customer loyalty and it gets those products closer to consumer need. And in terms of some work that we've done in the past with media brands, and this is in Clive Shepherd's book, if any of you've read it, there's a very formal learning requirement to support a very complex tool that gives their their advertising campaign planners information about the way that we consume media. Because advertising agencies these days are actually all about data. It's about crunching the numbers. So the system was complex. People were a bit intimidated by it. So they needed some really good training and performance support content on this tool. But that only takes you so far. The tool gives you the data, but then I've got to go and I've got to pitch to Pepsi about a brand new advertising campaign for which I want several £million to roll out because I believe that it will hit all of the key performance indicators and goals that they've got. So actually, it's then the translation of the data that becomes important. So we're only the very first step of a learning journey. So we wrapped a community around it. And that community then talks about, okay, well, once you've got those numbers, what I then did is the way that I present that, let's say in an oil and gas environment is this, but the way that I present that in an FMCG pitch would be like this, or the way I'd use this in Singapore is like this, but the way I use it in Brazil is like this. Adding that context. And the community actually had a little competition running each month for use cases of people using the data in the most effective way to basically get new clients. That also generated new learning content. So we'd share those case studies and they go back into the program. So the community owned the formal learning program. And that was a really beautiful way to bring the power of the community to increase the performance globally across the whole organisation. And what that means for L&D is their role becomes one of sifting, sorting, summarising and supporting. So 4 S's. So they are sifting through lots and lots of information and knowledge and insights that are being created and making those accessible and findable and searchable and codifying them in the right way. So if they can be codified, how should we codify them? It's a formal learning program. Is it just an improvement in performance support documents? Is it a quick guide? Or actually, if it's not readily codifiable, am I sorting out the right people to come together to talk about this and provide mentoring and insight and expertise? And they're making all of this accessible and they are facilitating and supporting that learning to happen. So the L&D role becomes a subtle but incredibly important role. And I've got a little takeaway for you. If any of you are interested in trying to introduce or reignite communities in your organisation, it's worth looking at the benefits that come along the way. If you think back to our call centre example, rolling out communities, one of the big challenges organisations have is, when will I see the return on this? Well, actually, communities, it can take a little while, but there are some lead indicators during the stages of community growth that can show the health check of a community. So if you've got more people starting to share, more collateral starting to be generated, that's a good sign that community is vibrant. Then you start to do basically the hard legwork of asking people how they're using the community, what benefit they're getting from it, is there anything they've applied? And you can start to then see the commercial benefits roll out from there. And it's why communities, for a performance environment, is why you need people that are responsible for facilitating learning and performance in the organisation. Sometimes it happens by accident, but as Gary Player says, the more I practice, the better I get. I'd say for organisations, the more you facilitate and the more that you support, the better outcome you're going to have. You could let serendipity do this, but actually well-facilitated communities always outperform those that don't. And don't be afraid for the fact that they come and go with need. There's got to be a clear purpose. And whatever you do, don't say that your next learning strategy is now this organisation is all about communities, because that's the quickest way to kill it. Communities bubble up and emerge where there is a real need, rather than communities being done to people. So let's go on to the old tools and technology. I stole this from Nick Shackleton-Jones. I'm sorry, Nick, I know he's not on here, and if anybody know Nick, tell him that I did give him a name check. But I love this slide that he used at Learning Live this year, which was the triumph of design over user experience. And how often do we see this in organisations, and particularly in the learning sphere, for the way in which we may use e-learning or procure LMS systems, where we don't think about the user experience, and we make functionality the biggest issue. You know, so we'll choose this tool, we'll choose this method because there's loads of functionality. Is it actually what users want? And it's something that we pay a huge amount of attention to and constantly assess with our platform pathway. In the end, it's got to be all about the user experience. That from there, there are, of course, there are key things that organisations want in terms of functionality, but user experience has to come front and centre. So whatever tools or techniques you're using, it's about creating the right choice architecture for your people so that the technology, just in that last slide, doesn't get in the way, that actually facilitates people's performance. And that might sound really obvious, but it's really easy to over-engineer this because it depends on my need. The reason why those bubbles changed is that this will shift depending on what I'm trying to achieve. You know, if I work in an organisation where, let's say I work in an accountancy firm, and it's really important that I get as many of our apprentices and our new people up to standard because perhaps, you know, we're specialist tax consultants or something like that, then actually a concentration on accreditation could be really important for us to secure new business, to stand out for our competitors. For other people, that will not matter a jot. If it's about getting new products to market really, really quickly, testing the market, being really innovative, then actually the social learning part of this is going to be incredibly important to bring people together to be able to hypothesis test and experience. Equally, and if I work in a high-risk environment, then making sure people have the right performance support tools they need, but also they're able to do some safe scenario experiential learning to make sure that they are fit to practice, depending on their organisation, that will be important. And that will help you choose the types of tools and techniques that you use for every learning need, right from your compliance stuff through to major organisational transformation. And so it's about thinking about the environment you want to create. And let's take the LMS for an example. Think about the LMS that you use or that you want. What conditions are you trying to create? If you're working in a highly regulated, accredited environment, then something that is formal, that is structured, that will help me through those steps. Actually, as much as a huge advocate of social learning, there are times when a formal learning scaffold is useful and is important. But there are times when it will utterly get in the way and stifle any innovation or creativity. But it isn't an either or. It is about being sensitive to the environment and the context that you're working in. And that should help inform the type of technology ecosystem that you want to create and support your people with. And this goes right down to, interesting applications of things like virtual reality. And this quote is taken from Wired magazine in April. And so, advocates of new technology, they certainly are. It's what their raison d'etre is. But even their team of big VR fans essentially said for VR experiences to be worth putting the headset on, it's got to be something that makes the most of you being somewhere. And the reason why that I wanted to make this point is, again, in choosing any tool, that's not to say that VR doesn't have huge applications, especially in high risk situations, either physical high risk or even kind of emotional high risk. Actually, VR and that sensory immersion can be incredibly powerful. But it isn't probably going to help you on the how do I book my holiday forms or get my expenses paid back as part of your induction. You probably don't need to do that in VR. So again, it's making the most of why you're going to use a particular approach or technology. So think about it this way. Let's think about using the strengths of each device, making it just in time when I need to, but building communities when I need deeper engagement, and that I'm getting that feedback and engagement so I can continue to design and build on what I already have, and that it is elegant and that it is simple, that it may not even mean that you have to buy something new. It could just be applying a portal view to what you have to make things just easier to get at, and hence the Uberization of learning, thinking about the actual user experience. So finally, as we're just about to wrap up, people. So what role do we play as learning and development professionals in this world? And what role do we play as a supplier to that profession? And in the end, all of us, our role is to catalyse learning. I'm not trying to deliberately introduce a new funky term into this that we're all going to use and that we can play boardroom bingo with. But the reason why I use the word catalyst is that in its truest definition, causing a chemical reaction to happen more quickly, or a person or event that causes change or action. The way that Tom described it to me, him being a scientist by training, a physicist, is that you're talking about bringing two elements together to react and create something else, to create a new action. And that's what performance in the organisation is all about. In the end, if we're not doing learning to make a positive impact on a something, then you have to ask why you're doing it in the first place. And to be able to do that, and I like this Jane Bozarth's quote here, I like this one, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. We have to understand the performance challenge. So as people, as learning development professions, it's why I talk about things like value chain and benefits tree. Understanding what the real performance challenge is has to be a deep dive. So for example, I'll set you a little challenge right now. A manager asked to book a member of a team on a decision-making course following a performance review meeting. What do you do? I can take another sip of water while you answer this one. You could say bang your head against a brick wall. That's a perfectly legitimate answer. Ask what outcome the manager is aiming for. Yep, absolutely right, Daniel. Great question, Margaret, actually. Find out where the request came from. Yep. And Nick, program the issue. And this is what we're going to get to. But I do particularly like that, Margaret, actually. Yeah, who's instigated that? Who thinks that decision-making is important and why? So it's a situation that I'm sure that all of us are familiar with. That, okay, here we go. I've done my performance reviews. These are the courses that I need to book because this is what my team aren't very good at. But thinking about decision-making, well, why is that important? It might seem like a silly question, but in the context of your team, Mr. or Ms. Team leader, why is that important? What sorts of decisions are people having to make? What are the barriers to decisions? Why do people not feel capable of making decisions? Is this a training issue? Is it a cultural issue? Is it an information issue? Is it a job clarity issue? There's so many reasons why decision making may be the symptom of, oh, now I'm finding it difficult to make a decision. Is it actually that people just simply don't have the access to the information they need to make a decision in the first place? Is this a skills issue or is it an input issue? And understanding that, so taking that almost value chain approach, helps you come up with something that is much more relevant that may not necessarily be a learning program. It may even be, dare I say it, something that the team manager has to address, not just the person. So taking that deep dive is really important because it helps build the complete picture. Because if we take on an example back of the increased market share, we can do the old gap analysis of, oh, well, in decision making could be the same. Oh, look, we're terrible at that because look, this, and this, we don't know about this, we don't know about this, we don't know about this. But it's also as important to find out what we already know. So it may well be that actually the person that has come with this issue of, they need a decision making course, they could be in the right circumstance excellent at making decisions, but it may be that we just simply are not looking at what we've already got and how we need to maximize and catalyze that. So it's building a complete picture of every learning need. We simply cannot be order takers anymore. It's got to take that partnership and deep dive. It does take some effort. It doesn't mean that it takes way longer, because in fact it should mean that the solutions gathering and definition bit becomes easier, but it means just as much to us as suppliers to learning and development of online learning content and technology as it does to the learning development profession. We also can't be order takers either. Having that deep dive approach is, when a customer comes to us and says, oh, we've got a compliance issue, could you create some e-learning? That's not where we start working. That's not where we up tools and start coding. There are many questions that we want to explore to understand whether that is the right solution and to be able to shape that solution in the right way, because there may be many different ways to achieve that. In fact, at the moment, I'm working on a project where it started as a commission for a blended learning program. It's actually become a commercially fronted website, something entirely different with a range of diagnostics and videos rather than a formal learning program hosted on LMS. So we have to be as open-minded as everybody else in terms of creating the right solutions for our customers too. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour on the sort of whole performance environment, some of the things that I've been thinking about and writing about recently that I wanted to share with you today. And I would love to find out if you've got any questions for me in the last few minutes. Oh, no problem, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Lovely to have you online. Oh, excuse me. And of course, if you don't have any immediate questions right now, please, can we train robots to do stuff in the non-codified column? It's a very good question, isn't it, Dave? And I think that we see robots riding bikes. I'm sure, maybe it was in some sort of fever dream, Dave, but I'm sure I've seen some sort of video from Japan on a robot riding a bike. Equally, though, and of course, the robots, think about chess. Obviously, Deep Blue was the big piece there, wasn't it, when it beat Kasparov at chess? But subsequent to, following on from that, I should say, after that happened, they've actually found now that it's the collaborative teams of grandmasters and the computers that are the most effective, not solely computers or grandmasters. So it's very interesting that how that point is played out there, Dave. And Margaret, how can you encourage a more holistic approach to learning when your learning is split across 2 or more departments? Well, I actually think that in some ways you almost need to go through that value chain exercise with your departments, actually, in terms of it's almost sitting back and sitting back again and deciding what is it that we all stand for, what is it that we're trying to do in each of our contexts. Because in the end, if it is all performance, actually there may be nuanced differences between your departments because they may have different focuses. But I think actually going back and analysing it almost at those critical steps from a value chain, what is it we're trying to achieve? Well, how do we do that? What are we made up of as people, as systems, as processes? Are they fit for purpose? Is really useful. But I also, at Orange, Margaret, set up a learning community. So we had learning departments all over the globe. So we had a community for those people. And it was a great way to maximise supplier agreements we had, to be honest, from a financial perspective, actually share some of that and be able to procure together. But it was a great way to share outcomes and experiences of learning interventions that were being put into the workplace, and also people that were bringing experience from outside. So actually it could be a really useful place to start a community. So yeah, that could be good. And Nick, no questions, no problem. But yeah, exactly, supply to demand driven offerings. It's exactly that, Nick. We can't be the order takers anymore. We're more than that. It's professional, motivated people, the sorts of people that I typically find working in learning and development that don't just want to be keepers of a catalogue. It can be a difficult argument to make. I'm not suggesting that this is easy, but that's where I would say the viral adoption model is really useful. Pick an area of the organisation you could work with in depth, and try out some of these techniques and build the business stories from there. And then you can get wider adoption going forward. And in fact, for yourself, Margaret, that could be a good, as they say, eating your own dog food. If learning and development wants to start with creating a community and creating a way to all support each other's performance, it's a great scene setter for helping the rest of the organisation. So I thank you again so much for joining me today. I have recorded this, so if you've got any colleagues that would like to watch this afterwards, I will be sharing the YouTube link to everybody that registered for the webinar. Please feel free to share it. We run webinars almost once a month. In some months when we've got a lot of events going on, it may slip a little bit, but we try to run them once a month. We're also at the ELN conference next week. I'm over in Devlin the week after that, and then I think Learning Technologies is our next big outing, as it were. But in the meantime, we'll have some webinars and I'll keep you updated on those. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a lovely rest of your day.